Good morning. We have reached the 10 o'clock hour. It is Friday, December 29th, 2023. The Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all other special assessment taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in special session. Only those items that indicate specific time will be heard at the assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. We call this meeting to order and let's go with taking the roll.
Supervisor Borges?
Here.
Supervisor Wilson?
Here.
Supervisor Starkey?
Here.
Chair Short?
I'm here.
And I'll make note that Supervisor Howard is absent.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Wilson, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance, please?
Again, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Let's move to the consent agenda this time. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment on consent agenda items?
Yes, good morning. I am somewhat offended by the fact that this board has chosen to use this meeting as a special meeting, which once again limits the participation by the public for anything other than what the board has deemed by fiat as important to the county. I see no evidence by this agenda that it's anything other than a normal board meeting without a public comment session. It appears that the board has taken a vacation in talking about their activities over the past 2 weeks, but other than that, I find the idea that this is a special session an anathema.
So I'm going to talk about number 9. You all, I hope you got your some paper out and did math. So you're freezing step A, and you're going to hire people at step B. Minimum wage goes up to $16 an hour in January. Our infamous governor, Nuisance, has decided April 1st, McDonald's workers and all fast food workers are going to be making $22 an hour. But county is offering $16.40, 40 cents above minimum wage. Now, I would think working for the county or the city is a prestigious job. And as such, that job should be paying their workers $5 to $7 more per hour above minimum wage. This is outrageous. Good luck with finding people who want to work for you. It's not going to fly. When that minimum wage goes up to $22 an hour, we all know what's going to happen. Nobody's going to be able, it's still going to be minimum wage, nobody's going to be able to afford. So you folks should reconsider this and we should cut the fat at department heads, wages, and think about your county workers. Because if you don't have any, I know you all ain't going to do it. Thank you.
Good morning. Norma Williams, Chapter President, DNCEA, SEIU 1021. Following up on what Linda said, thank you for that. This is just a Band-Aid yet again. We all know that it's a Band-Aid. When we discussed this with your county team, even your county team acknowledged it's a Band-Aid, but it's only to meet the legislative mandate as well as our contract, because it is in our contract that we have to basically have no county worker working below minimum wage. Obviously, the move to 16 was a surprise to both sides. Obviously, we were also taken up by the fire as well as budget concerns, but still, it's just a Band-Aid. We have contract negotiations going into next year. And obviously, the county and the union will be meeting to address that. And yes, obviously, because of what Governor Newsom did, fast food workers will be making, I was told, $20 an hour starting at minimum wage. But what you have, however, in like counties, like comparable counties, when I did a study just for the cooks in the jail, is that some of those counties, their minimum wage is at 18, some even more than that. So all I can tell you is this. I know what you're going to say next year. I can already hear what your county team's going to say next year. But you know something? Minimum wage can no longer be the floor. You have a vacancy rate of 29% across the board. In your largest department, that's at 35%. And that's a funded department, by the way. I have the vacancy rate numbers because the union demanded them. We asked for them. Because we've been seeing the trajectory in terms of our bargaining unit numbers. Already heard and saw in the newspaper where the sheriff's department is at 25%. You're losing deputies, you're losing dispatchers, and that's even with Measure R. And this is okay with all of you? Just meeting the minimum wage is no longer acceptable. It's not going to be acceptable to county employees next year. Minimum wage can no longer be the floor. We're going to make you remember that in 2024.
Thank you. Is there any other comment on consent agenda items? Seeing no other comment, I'll close the comment period and bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion.
I was going to actually ask Chair, not to pool necessarily, but to make comments on both number 7 and number 9, if the Chair would allow.
Certainly, go right ahead.
So my comment on number 7, which is the volunteer camp and volunteer caretaker program, several constituents did reach out to me and express their concern that limiting that to 6 or 12 months could make it more difficult for us to fill those positions. While I don't know, so I'm going to just say, my comment is that I would like to make sure that we monitor this. So if we have somebody in there for 6 months and for some reason they're doing a great job and we do 12 months and then we need to transfer them to another park or assignment, but let's monitor that. We might want to have to revisit that if we are finding that that is causing a difficulty. That's my comment on that. And with regard to number 9, I don't disagree with any of the comments here. This is a Band-Aid, and we know it's a Band-Aid. And I want to make the urging with this board is for us to really look at our salaries this next year, where we're seeing it across the board. And it's a very sad state of affairs that we're in. So I'm echoing the comments that were made, but also I want to say that we need to actually dive deep, look into this. The floor should not be minimum wage for county employees. That should absolutely not be the case. So although I'm going to approve the Band-Aid today, I really want this to be top on our list moving forward, that we look at all of this because it's unacceptable.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah. So one of the other things on this agenda today is we're talking about long-term strategy planning, and that was part of the reason why I have been pushing for this issue, because this is one of the issues that needs to be addressed in the long term. This has to be a thought out and planned. How do we address the change? Because it really requires us to change our current step system and pay system to something that actually works and is reflective. But it also requires us to look at our county services and what we can and what we have to prioritize in the long run, because I don't see the economic picture going forward for Delaware County to be one of roses. I think we're going to end up in difficult times, and that's going to require us to decide where our priorities are and where our money is going to be. The other thing that unfortunately is not reflected, and the comments that I do not agree with that were made up here, is that when someone says $16 an hour, that does not reflect the entire cost that a county incurs in putting that employee into because the $22 worker at McDonald's does not make retirement, does not have the health benefits, does not have the coverage that is required. When you look at a $16 an hour worker, you have to add 35% to that cost, because that's what we have to do, and then when you put a deputy in a car, that's a 70% cost in addition to that base salary that the county has to cover for these employees. And if you put that added to that $16 an hour, they're making more than the $20 an hour workers in many cases. But those benefits are not reflected in that hourly wage. And so the cost associated with putting that employee in a position in Delaware County or any other county that does not reflect in those numbers is all the benefits that the county has to pay for. And the reality of those benefits is that as the state goes deeper in debt, they roll those costs back to the county and say you have to increase your share proportionate to workman's comp, to disability, to health care, to retirement. And that increases our proportional cost associated with putting somebody in a seat. And that is not reflected in the numbers that you were commenting on.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do know that positively, because that's the unfortunate thing of reality and budgets. When I used to work as a sheriff, it wasn't the salary, but to put a deputy into a seat for a year cost us over $100,000. And that was not just a part of his salary. It was everything else that went with that employee. And you have to look at that as a county board when we are looking at what can we afford to put in and where can we afford to place those employees, because it's not just reflected in the hourly wage.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I would like to bring up a little piece in the volunteer camp host and volunteer caretaker program. In those two programs, there's a restriction of firearms, and specifically it calls out those who have a concealed carry permit, which means that they've gone through a background check, they've gone through trainings in order to carry that firearm, and we are specifically restricting them. I don't think that's something we should do. I don't believe that we should be restricting somebody's ability to protect themselves, especially in the places where we're putting them. So I would wonder if there was any discussion or any entertainment of deleting that verbiage out of those two programs.
I would like to hear from risk management, actually, to see why that was included in there before I would be able to comment on it. I'm sorry, Supervisor Borges, I jumped in.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Whitney Pinkham, Risk Management for Administration. There was a lot of discussion around the firearms component of both the caretaker and the camp host program guidelines. We tried to write it in a couple of different ways that would provide the county and the visitors to the park the most protection possible. And at the end of the day, the best way to protect camp hosts and visitors was to just eliminate the possibility of firearms or ammunition being on county property. So we went through quite a few different scenarios, and one that came up that we just couldn't find a way to control is if a visitor were to break into a camp host's RV or a camp host's residence and, steal a firearm or something of that nature. We have had thefts of camp host property occur at our parks in the past, so it's not a far-fetched scenario. So, after much discussion back and forth with our administrative team, county council, it was decided that the best course of action to protect, like I said, both the camp hosts and the visitors of the park was just to eliminate the possibility of firearms being on property entirely.
Are there restrictions in the camps themselves for visitors not allowed to have firearms, even if they have their CCW?
Correct. I would refer to Alan Winograd on that, but there should not be any firearms on county property.
So basically what our rules state is firearms are not allowed. You come into our campground, you have a firearm in your vehicle, we're not going to go searching for it. We're not going to say, hey, I hear that you have a firearm, you're going to have to leave the park. But I believe what we're working on here is to try to eliminate the exposure to the county. And we've had camp hosts items stolen. We've had people break into the trailers are very notorious for being broken into very easily. And the discussion did come about of the worst case scenario is somebody breaks into a camp host trailer, steals a firearm, shoots someone, and then the county is actually on the hook for that because it was a firearm that was on county property and that we did approve it to be there.
And that, when you say no firearms, that includes the CCW, people that are approved to carry?
Well, once again, we do not ask. If you were walking around the park and we know you have a CCW, I'm not going to say, hey, Joey, are you carrying? That's not my place.
But you would say that to a camp host, is I think.
If I had a camp host that I knew was carrying a firearm, absolutely, I would bring that up.
I think that's the difference here.
Yeah, as a guest, it's a completely different situation as opposed to a volunteer or a county employee.
Does that not go, unless there's an ordinance that says no, firearms at all?
I
including
believe that
CCWs?
it
that
is
in
part
place?
of the campground rules of no firearms or fireworks are allowed in the county or are allowed in the campgrounds.
Because that's kind of the purpose of someone's rights with a CCW is, to protect themselves. But if that's an ordinance, that brings up a different.
I agree 100%, and I'm not ever going to argue that portion of it. And it's like I said, I'm also not going to question. I'll say people who I know have a CCW, and if they're in the campground, I'm not going to say, are you carrying? It's like I said.
Yeah, my only concern is I have no problem with camp host or anybody, especially since those are domiciles and you have every right to protect yourself, especially in your home. My biggest concern would only be in the case of making sure that any camp host that did have a CCW, that there was clear delineation as, they're in no way supposed to be utilizing or having that firearm as an enforcement mechanism or as a influencer when they're making contact with those that are in the park, even those that are maybe causing trouble, because again, they're not there to be law enforcement.
We actually did have a camp host who had an air pistol, who wandered around the campground with the air pistol, and the answer was no. I'll say that is not part of what you do. You see an unlawful activity going on, you call law enforcement, you separate yourself from the situation. And packing anything that looks like a firearm, even if it is just an air pistol or an airsoft or whatever it is, we don't allow that because that's not what we want.
In the news, there was the other day a 12-year-old broke into a home with an airsoft and was killed by the homeowner. Yeah. Because again, you don't question somebody when they're have something that looks like a gun and they're pointing at it.
And I just want to make sure that the board knows this decision wasn't made lightly. It was probably the most contentious point in writing this policy is how do we write it in a way that would allow them to still serve as a camp host even if they have a CCW? And how can we write this in a way that protects our visitors and protects the camp hosts? And do we put specifications in there on the way that it's stored within the domicile and that it cannot be used on county property? It must be taken off county property. And at the end of the day, the best way for us to avoid liability in the event that something horrific did happen is to just have it in writing that we did not permit this ammunition or any sort of guns whatsoever.
I mean, walking around and carrying an air pistol and brandishing a gun and all of those things, I mean, that's a direct violation of a CCW anyway. I mean, they're a concealed weapons permit, right? And so that person is already supposed to be upheld to a higher standard and been vetted and trained and approved by the sheriff. Mm-hmm. So I would say the two are not the same as far as, somebody walking around with a pistol on their hip saying, pay your fees, or someone, with a permit that's been approved by our sheriff. I would say they're not.
Right.
It's not the same conversation.
I agree with you. It's not the same conversation. At the end of the day, we don't want either in our parks.
Chair?
Yes.
We could table this, take it back, maybe incorporate some of your comments and propose 2 alternatives. And then you guys can decide if you'd rather take that action.
I think that would be wise. I kind of disagree that, taking that right away from somebody actually protects them. I'm completely against that line of thinking. I understand our county risk management perspective. I do. I just don't believe that we need to, or that we should take that right away from somebody who is a lawful carrier of concealed weapons. And open carry is not legal in California anymore either. So to open carry a weapon in a park is, they're committing a crime there, so.
Yeah, and I do echo what they said. There was a lot of back and forth with this. Unfortunately, we've had problems in the past that have, opened us up to a lot of liability. And so that's why it was developed the way it was. It was also developed that way in looking at what the state does, what the federal government does, and then what other counties do in regards to their policies. But my suggestion would be that you table it, and then we can look further into it, and then include your comments, and we can go forward from there.
And I do know the state of California has passed legislation that requires lock boxes and those kinds of things in your home, in your domicile. And so just to adhere to those requirements would alleviate a lot of the issues that you were concerned about as far as easy access to the firearms, if they're broke into.
That would be the hope, right? We do have it written in a multitude of ways, so it would not take a lot of work to table this and then bring it back at a later date.
And just to be clear, I'm not saying that, hey, bring your safe full of guns and line the house full of weapons. I'm specifically talking about somebody that's been approved with the CCW as their personal protection device, not just, I want to have random guns laying around the house. That's my only topic, I guess, or concern.
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, it kind of just caught my eye that he spoke to specifically to include those who possess a concealed weapons permit. I mean, they've gone through the training, they're licensed. If we want to include another little training that says, this is not an enforcement avenue for being a park host or something to those people, I would be maybe in favor of that. But taking that right away from them, I'm not in favor of. So I would move that we continue this item to a future meeting to include revisions about included are those of what we discussed today. Is there a second? I know it's
I'll second that.
Okay.
kind of
I just want to say.
uncommon for the chair to make the motion, but
Sure. I just want to say that I would prefer not to include the revisions, but to provide alternatives so that we can still maybe perhaps keep this as it stands. So if that's okay.
Yep, absolutely. Option A, B, and C coming your way. Do you have any other questions about the programs before we leave? Anything else we can look into before the next meeting?
Other than the concern of the constituent that reached out to me is with regard to sometimes you want somebody in there that's 12 months and that they're doing a really good job and they've not had complaints and that sort of thing, that we might want to have a caveat to consider them. But again, I feel like we could look that after we assess this for a while.
Okay, all right.
very good. I think we need to pull the vote on continuing this item.
Supervisor Starkey?
Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, so is there any other discussion on items 6 through 11 minus 7? Seeing no other discussion, we will poll the vote for those other consent agenda items.
I don't have a motion or a second.
I'm sorry, I even didn't write that down. Do we have a motion to?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Supervisor
Second.
Borges. We have a motion and a second by Supervisor Wilson. Could we now pull the vote? Sorry about that.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, Item number 12, accept the resignation of Joel Campbell Blair, County Council, effective January 5th, 2024, and authorize Human Resources to open a recruitment for the position of County Council, effective immediately. And 2, appoint Assistant County Council Jacqueline Roberts to the interim County Council at range Step A1, Step D, effective at the start of business on January 8th, 2024, as requested by the County Administrative Officer. I'm going to open this up for any public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
You really lost a good attorney. Shame on you.
Yeah, good morning. I just want to mention on your YouTube channel that you guys have for the meetings, why don't you turn the comments on if you really care what people are saying? It's a old thing. Turn the comments on. Thank you.
Mostly because they get vulgar. And
These are comments from people, so
you're
vulgar or
talking about
not.
typed in comments. Yeah.
I will, is there any other? I will begrudgingly accept the resignation of Joel Campbell Blair and happily appoint the Assistant County Council for the interim.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Chair, can we also include in that motion to authorize Human Resources to open the recruitment for the position?
Is that not?
I should
Yeah.
have read the entire thing exactly like
Just
it
to be-
was.
just to be
Chair
certain.
Short had already
Sorry.
read that,
Thank
but
you.
yes, so I continue to begrudgingly accept the resignation of Joel Campbell Blair and authorize Human Resources to open a recruitment for the position of County Council effective immediately, and then happily appoint the Assistant County Council, Jackie Roberts, as the interim County Council.
Here we go for that motion. And was the second by
Second.
Supervisor Wilson? Okay, Kylie, will you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, item 13, approve the agreement for placement of juvenile whole court wards at Shasta County Juvenile Rehabilitation Facility as requested by the Chief Probation Officer. Good morning, Lonnie.
So you have my board report before you and the contract. I won't belabor the point, but this is, it fills a need for redundant contracts that I've been speaking of since discussion began of closing the hall. I think Shasta County does a fabulous job with our kids, offers us great opportunities when we have need of accessing those resources. I'm available for discussion or comments if you wish.
Any such comments or discussion for the board for Lonnie?
No, other than it's something that we do need to have redundancy. We can't be dependent solely on Humboldt County. As you know, the numbers increase and they become unavailable. That may happen in the future. Hopefully not, but at least we have an alternative and have a contract in place, which is necessary.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Anything further from?
I have a lot of questions. You knew I would. So within the last year, how many youth were housed over in Shasta County? How many did we transport over to Shasta County?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. At the beginning of the year, we were using Shasta County solely as we were operating in special purpose. Once we secured the contract with Humboldt, I believe that was late January or February of this year, we've been using them as our primary custodial institution. They are our primary custodial institution. Shasta County, pardon me, Shasta County has been used as a redundant location. In those cases, it's been rare that Humboldt's had to decline because of population issues on their end. So we've had a few youth that have served time. The last youth that we had in custody in Shasta County served out a dispo, variable, I think it was a 60 to 90. And he finished his term and I believe was successfully discharged from probation at the beginning of this month.
Okay. So here's the heartburn that I'm having, is that when a county council doesn't approve the contract, and you know, we are here and we trust our county council.
Yes.
And so you've laid out all your reasons why we should do this anyway and not heed the advice of our county council. I've got some real heartburn with this because in your board report, you talk about how you went over this indemnity clause with other chiefs in the county, and they said that we had a unique interpretation of the requirements. It didn't say it was a wrong interpretation, it was just a unique interpretation. Is that correct?
So I wasn't addressing an indemnity clause. Indemnity has never been the issue that's been brought forward to me. So this is solely to do with joint powers.
Okay.
If there's some kind of issue with indemnity, it's never been discussed with me.
Okay, so the joint powers, the other, you're saying the other chiefs that you talked to said that joint powers, that's not, we don't need to do that.
There is no other county in the state that I'm aware of, as of this day and previously, that uses joint powers language in their contracts.
Except for Humboldt and us.
Except for us and Humboldt.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we should pause for a second, just so we can get back online, Chair.
Yeah, that's fine. If,
Sorry,
wait
Lonnie.
for
Lonnie's frozen.
Just-
IT to.
Yeah,
give us
because
the
I'm
comment.
recording and stuff, and IT might be just in case, so if we can just
Is it
pause.
windy out? Is that the?
It
It's
is,
very
yeah.
stormy outside, yes.
That happens.
It's just going to be a couple minutes because my computer has to reboot and stuff too, so, sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Then your 3 minutes starts again.
Yes, we're not limiting it.
Just keep me on the clock.
Does it feel awkward, Mackenzie, having everybody look at you?
You got this, girl, you got this.
Okay, mine's still updating, so if you feel like we're good on our end, like people can still
Hear us.
see and hear and stuff, then I'm good. I'll just be a minute before I can see online and stuff.
Okay,
Are you,
and that's,
do we have the go-ahead IT or?
say that again, Neil, or we're still? Oh, yeah, we're back up on these screens. I just didn't know if we were up. For the remote audience.
We're back on.
Okay, we're back on. Thank you for that, Kylie.
Yeah,
Mackenzie,
Kylie,
appreciate
thank
that.
you.
So I can give you two examples. So
Okay.
there is one regional facility, Yuba Sutter Calusa, and they operate as a regional facility under that specific code section. I've not looked at how that structure works. I would imagine it requires a joint power since that is a regional facility.
Okay.
The language that we did come up with for our contract with Humboldt came from an old Lake County, Mendocino County agreement that's no longer in effect. I didn't explore the reasons with either of those two chiefs why that doesn't continue to occur. If I recall correctly, Lake County currently is contracting with Tehama County and not housing their youth in Mendocino, if I recall correctly.
Okay. Again, it's the, we say none of the chiefs in the counties that you spoke to over the last several years maintained or had those JPAs.
Correct.
But did you contact their county councils?
I did not, no.
Okay, so, because that's my real concern here, is that we've got a county council saying that this isn't the way we should be doing it. And I hope you can appreciate that every single, thing that happens, right, there's a first. Richard Allen Davis was the first three strikes law.
Right.
So
Yes.
while there is no litigation out there currently, we don't want to be the first.
And I completely understand and agree. And
Okay.
part of the discussion surrounding this whole contract this particular year was twofold, that we would continue our conversations with Shasta, because in the discussions with county council administration, that concern was still there.
Okay.
And so I'm open to continuing that conversation with Shasta. I think we'll face the challenges and hurdles that I outlined in my report. Because it is unique, because it is approved by and has to be approved by two different state agencies in addition to the counties.
Right,
This-
but
the
I
second-
just want to point out, though.
Can I interject a question? When you, if it's okay.
I'm just curious, our county council brought us law that says you have to have a JPA.
Which we do.
So yes, we do. But the premise is that, I mean, the idea is that no other chiefs are doing that, and we have a unique interpretation.
Correct.
But you have not brought us something in law that says we don't have to. So I'm confused as to why the other chiefs aren't abiding by that law. Do you have any idea? Have they given you any idea why they don't abide by that?
Honestly, when I've brought this up at the state meetings, it's not something that's ever been broached by their county councils and the contracts that they have. Never raised as an issue before. And I can't tell you why that is. I can't tell you why those county councils nor those chiefs look at that law and interpret it differently than ours does. This is an assumption, implicit on my part. It would be my belief that the counties are looking at these as exercises of their powers as counties to operate juvenile halls, and they've never identified a specific need to include the JPA language. My guess is it's an implied understanding that they're doing so, and it's never been challenged. As Supervisor Starkey said, nobody wants to be the first, but at the same time, this has been happening for decades and decades and decades. It's possible that, yeah, we could end up being the first if someone wanted to challenge that. The situation we find ourselves in now, as I brought up in the discussions with county administration and council earlier this year, is that we do have that JPA language. We have a juvenile hall in Humboldt County. The question I posed is, how does that change our situation? Because we're not any longer operating under a contract, any kind of contract, or looking at a possible contract with another county that doesn't include that language. We have an existing JPA agreement with Humboldt County. So how does that situation transform the circumstance that we find ourselves in now in trying to establish redundant contracts with other counties when Humboldt doesn't have the capability or capacity to actually house our kids? I thought we had reached an acceptable compromise by utilizing a standing order with the court, which the judge has indicated in the past he would be amenable to, and it'd be for short-term periods in accordance with the code, no more than 60 days. Our youth that we're planning on housing, if we house any youth, are going to be detained for the first time. We have a requirement to bring those youth back before the court in no more than 3 business days, basically. So our practice as it has stood is that we have those kids in front of a judge on a regular basis, not even close to 60 days. And the court has a regular opportunity to review those custodial orders and amend them. We have the opportunity, if the possibility opens up in Humboldt, to actually move those kids closer. And most of the time that is of a huge benefit to us, both us and the kids. On rare occasions, it doesn't work out that way because a kid is established in programming and things like that. And we would have to make sure that we abide by those 60-day timeframes at the very minimum.
I understand, but I guess my point is that we were showed a law that we're supposed to abide by, and I am concerned that, when we're supposed to depend on our county council to keep us out of hot water, and this is exactly what he did, that he was kind of, ignored, almost demonized because of it. So,
well, frankly,
that was my question. I apologize for interrupting Supervisor Starkey, but
when you look at the code and the requirements, an order from the court is specific. In 872, when there is no juvenile hall in a county, or when it is unfit, by order of the judge and by the agreement of the 2 probation officers, we can house a youth out of county. And in all the discussions that we had, that was the stated intention. Assistant County Counsel drafted a standing order that I forwarded to the judicial assistant because we were moving towards that specific structure of a standing order rather than a specific order for each youth. And I have no issue with that. That meets the need that we have for a redundant detention facility, and it meets the requirement of the code and the concern of council, as I was informed. It was only after I had submitted this twice for approval, and it was pulled without any more discussion with me, that we've hit this point.
I understand. Okay. Thank you for answering the question about the JPA language. I'm sorry, Supervisor Starkey,
Thank
for
you.
interrupting.
So let's just move on then to the 872 WIC code. How that works is, I just really want to break this down so I understand it. A youth gets arrested at 11 p.m. We can only hold them in our special housing for 8 hours?
6 hours.
6 hours.
Temporary
So
detention.
we have to, with this, the judges have agreed that at midnight, we can call them, we can go over to their house, we can have them sign this order, and then we can then transfer them to Shasta County. Is that the way that this is going to work?
So currently, that's the only way it can work if I do hit that situation tonight. What Assistant County Counsel proposed was a standing order rather than a specific order. So in that case, the judge has said, under these circumstances, when housing in Humboldt County cannot be had, you may house that youth in Shasta County according to 872, so meeting the requirements of timelines and things like that. That would basically bypass the need for a midnight call because of the standing order rather than a specific order per youth per arrest.
Okay. And so we go and they're in Shasta County. They have to come back to our county within
Yes.
3 days, 72 hours.
Yes.
And then the judge then could then reiterate on the record the continuation of housing outside of Humboldt with whom we have a JPA.
Correct.
Okay. And it's only Shasta County.
That is the only county well, I say only county. We do have Sonoma, as I said in the report, that was for one youth. The only county that we have been using for detention, things like that, is Shasta.
Okay.
outside of Humboldt,
With
yes.
Sonoma County, is there a JPA in place with them?
There is not. No.
Okay. Okay, I do have the concerns, obviously. It sounds like you have come up with a loophole that will work in order to appease this. I just really, it goes back to why I had such heartburn getting rid of our juvenile hall to begin with. So I do appreciate you answering these questions for me today, but I still have the concerns.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. Any other discussion? Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah. So, because I've dealt with this for a good number of years, and I know the history behind it, we're not reinventing the wheel here.
We are not.
No. This is something that has been tried and true and has not been a bone of contention for many counties who have found themselves in similar or like circumstances where juvenile halls didn't exist in many counties, smaller counties, and contracts were held up for years and years, decades. And this is nothing new. This is, and having the oversight with the judge to approve these standing orders gives us that overall oversight that is so necessary and needed in these cases when we're dealing with juveniles. And so, again, I don't have the heartburn that others have with this because, again, these are systems that county jails have worked well with and juvenile halls have worked well with for a good number of long decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Borges, nothing? All right, Lonnie, thank you very much for presentation and answering questions.
Absolutely.
I'm going to open this up for public comment at this time. Is there any public comment on this item?
Since this is a redundancy program, is there going to be a cost to the county if we don't utilize it? Or is it just simply when we utilize it, there'll be a cost to the county?
When we have juveniles housed there, we pay. When we don't, we don't.
Thank you.
That's the way I believe that's the way
Jackie,
I
is
read
that
it.
true?
That's the
Okay.
way I read it, yeah. Any other public comment? Good morning, Paul.
Good morning there. Paul Dillard, Juvenile Justice Commission. I don't have any real issues here going on, not throwing stones. I have concerns. a lot of posturing going on here between counties, and I think that's unfortunate that it's government at the time. But I do have a major question. I support JPAs. I think they're there for a purpose. But in Lonnie's report, and I didn't catch it the first time I read it, after the administrative manual, I can't give you the page, but it says, although custody contracts before you may not be a state of California standard agreement under that specific definition, it is an agreement between and continues to be approved between two separate state agencies. What is the California Standard Agreement, and what parts are we overlooking? What did we delineate in we made these agreements? I have concerns about that part, and I feel obligated to bring that to your attention, that to me, that could be a huge liability. And that pretty much makes me wonder why. That's why a JPA cleans up things, and I can't help that Shasta doesn't want to do the work. But your county council has brought forward, risk management has brought it forward. There's issues here, and you need to dig a little deeper. You got some work to do, Joel, and it's your leadership, and we need to look at this. So there's something wrong here, and it don't smell good. The other thing I'd like to know is the report speaks to sometimes Humboldt don't take things. I understand population, but what are the other reasons? Because I've been told there's some other reasons. I'm not willing to go on record against Lonnie for what I'm hearing, but I think he should speak. What are the other reasons? If I'm going to throw a dart at you, you supervise him. I'm entitled to a monthly report on probation and juvenile hall for juveniles, and I haven't seen a report in over 90 days. So I ask you, please make sure that happens. Our meeting is the second Wednesday. I don't want it on Thursday after the meeting. We're entitled to it before the meeting. He knows exactly when the meetings are, and I appreciate if you could ask him to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other public comment on this item? See?
Sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and go with that one.
Robert, you are on?
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm just curious, is this, are we going to be storing unconvicted youth outside the community? And the Juvenile Justice Commission, the previous speaker, are those meetings open to the public? Thank you.
He's not going to be able to hear him if he
I'll
doesn't.
I'll answer for you, Robert. Those are closed meetings because of the sensitivity of the conversations that are being had with regard to the juveniles.
And he also had a question.
And yes, and yes, we do house unconvicted
Yes, that's
minors.
exactly what it would be. It would be unadjudicated youth being housed outside of the county.
And that's, the chief spoke to the 3 business days that we have to get the juvenile in front of a judge, so. With those, with public comment over, I'll close the public comment period and bring it back to the board for a motion or further discussion.
I move to approve.
We have
I'll
a
second that.
Motion to approve and a second. Kylie, will you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Starkey?
No.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, item 14 on presentations. Receive an update on the federal fiscal year 25 earmark project formulation as requested by the Assistant Administrative Officer. Randy, good morning.
Good morning, board. Thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, earmarks. We all know them. I think to a certain degree, we all love them. They're pretty great for local communities. But what the board and the public may not be aware is really the work that's involved in putting an earmark request together. The way that I think that they're oftentimes presented by the federal delegates that kind of work the sausage making process in DC is that it's kind of money from the sky for the community. It really in a way is. It's money that isn't part of our local budget, but it's money that comes from taxes and from the taxpayers that comes back to the community. And we've had pretty good success the last couple years with actually securing earmarks through those federal delegates' work in DC and our federal advocates. But again, there is quite a bit of work that goes into it. Earmarks, as I presented in your board report, have kind of a long history, but they actually went away for a number of years too. So they were only really brought back, I think, within the last 3 or 4 fiscal years, and they were given fancy new names. We all still call them earmarks. In the Senate, I think they're called congressionally designated spending, and in the House, they're called community funded projects, or I might have that in reverse. But essentially, again, it's federal money that's allocated to local communities for projects that are important to those local communities. So again, we've had pretty good success the last couple of years. Fiscal year 22, federal fiscal year. I should specify these are all federal fiscal years, so it's a little bit different than our local and state fiscal years. But we received, I think as the board is all aware, the $3.1 million, which is getting used for the jail design and rehabilitation. Fiscal year 23, there was money appropriated for improvements to the computer-aided dispatch system in the jail or in the sheriff's office, which was, I think, presented at the last meeting by federal engineering. So some of those improvements that were pointed out needing to be made are in fact being made thanks to this funding source. This most recent federal fiscal year, we put in a request through our federal delegation for improvements to Pike Field, and that had to do with issues relating to drainage and playability of the fields, and so that is still in process. It's very much in play according to our federal advocates, and that would get us a little over $500,000 for some of the improvements that we've identified as needing to be made to county facilities, in that case Pike Field. But again, there's quite a bit of work that goes into putting these together in terms of the justification, the eligibility, kind of the parameters by which an idea could be turned into a funded project. And so in years past, thankfully with the jail and the dispatch system in Pike Field, there was quite a bit of backup materials available to support those requests. And we were able to put those projects together for our federal advocate to have those conversations in DC that they could be supported. What typically happens is that because of the timing of the earmark process, what happens is there's a mad rush in the late winter and early spring to kind of put these things together. And again, based on previous projects, we had kind of some of the background information that we were able to compile and put it together and present it in a way that they were able to be supported. That never really involved, I would say, a very public process or a very board engaged process. But again, there were certainly projects that I think the board and the public could be supportive of, understanding the need. But what we really wanted to do this year was to get more in front of it. And this kind of ties into the conversation that we're going to have here in a minute with respect to strategic planning, which is really just trying to get in front of these issues. Part of that strategy was hiring our on-call engineering, architecture, planning services companies to help us put together projects, again, to be competitive with different funding programs. That could be grants, it could be these earmarks. And so through conversations last fall with our federal advocates, Thorn Run Partners, what we did is we requested more information on the front end, so we weren't in kind of a mad dash at the 11th hour to try to get a project put together. And they did. They gave us a memo that talked about all the different funding programs, the ways that different projects could be eligible. And we engaged with the board, with the department heads, and with the public through the Capital Improvements Technical Advisory Committee, kind of a process to kind of formulate some of these ideas and to come up with really kind of a wish list. Obviously, a wish list isn't something that can be funded. So from the wish list, we had further conversations with Thorn Run and really distilled those ideas down into things that would be considered eligible and competitive. These are projects that in DC are highly competitive. All the congressmen, all the senators basically put ideas on the table. They have to go through different budget committees, and they kind of winnow down projects through that process too. So our idea is to try to be as competitive as we can with what it is we're submitting. Through those conversations with the board, the department heads, and the technical advisory committee, again, the wish list was a really pretty broad, pretty expansive. We had ideas like improvements to the Barrow Ranch, which is, obviously a prime piece of county property that since the closure of the ranch has kind of just fallen into disuse. But we know after having a feasibility study done on it, what it would cost to do some improvements to get it into a usable condition. Could be used for a number of different reasons. Development of EV charging stations concerns with kind of the promotion of EV vehicles and the kind of proliferation of EV vehicles within the county. Workforce housing, we always hear about housing shortages for employees, for members of the community. It was already mentioned vacancy rates within the county earlier, and a lot of that has to do with access to housing. Improvements to the parks facilities with respect to electrical and plumbing systems, feasibility of a justice center. We have a district attorney's office. We now have a public defender's office. We have a probation office. We have vacant county land that could be potentially repurposed for a justice type center where we could house all those different services. Replacement of the Red Mountain repeater site. Again, the list was very broad. Through the course of those conversations, getting it distilled into projects that could be eligible and competitive, we kind of landed on some projects that the board has already taken a position of support on, which is the South Beach project. We have this prime stretch of coastal real estate to the south of Crescent City that's really an entrance into Crescent City that is really underdeveloped, underutilized, and it's certainly appreciated. I'm not going to say it's underappreciated, but it could be so much more. Everyone that drives by there recognizes and sees that, and so our federal advocate thought that could be a really competitive project where the county potentially could receive funding to do acquisition of land and put it in some public infrastructure improvements. The other idea is a project that we've discussed, which is the Veterans Hall. There's improvements that obviously need to be made to our county Veterans Memorial Hall. There's ADA compliance issues over there. There's access issues to the second floor. There's a number of different things that we've pursued funding for previously that we haven't been successful in obtaining the funding for, but this would be another opportunity that we could explore. So the South Beach Welcome Center, the Veterans Hall, and then a community wayfinding program, which, again, you drive through a lot of communities, you see there's a theme that is established within the community that's kind of reflective of the public's view of their community. I think the city did a pretty good job in the city where there's directional signs to, various points of interest within the city that kind of all fit within the theme that Crescent City is trying to establish. And this isn't uncommon. You go to other communities, particularly communities that have, high visitor serving uses and kind of cater to tourism. We have, national state parks. We have the national forest. We have county parks. We have tribal and cultural heritage to be celebrated. So again, this was a project, the community wayfinding program that the federal advocates seem to think could be pretty successful and would be something that the federal delegates could kind of point back to the community and say this was a good investment. So those are really the three that are recommended. Again, trying to get in front of this process this year so we don't end up in February trying to put together a project at the last minute. This item was added to the special session because we really do want to get this in front of our on-call engineers as soon as possible. We've already solicited proposals for those services, and what we would hope to do would be to package up kind of a proposal for what these projects could look like, kind of a before and after, certainly a budget estimate to support the requested funding, and then return to the board for a resolution and kind of presentation of these different ideas. We'll be working on that hopefully through January, have it completed hopefully by the end of January, maybe the first part of February, and return to the board, probably do some press releases and try to get some good public engagement on this issue and get it out to DC for consideration. So that's a lot, but that's that project. If there's any questions, I'm certainly available.
It's a big project, but hopeful. Any questions or comments for Supervisor Wilson?
My comments are I'm glad to see that these issues brought forward. I'm glad to see that these projects are on the list. We've had conversations on this several times. It's also a good time because to look towards that South Beach development area, because there are dollars that Caltrans is moving forward towards to try to shore up that section. Also, the Elk Valley Rancheria has received federal dollars, and they just acquired property along that South Beach area that they will be developing for public access. And they also have elk viewing development that they're going to be doing, which was separate funding, federal funding, that they'll be doing on the opposite side of the 101 corridor, where they have that pasture land right now that houses a lot of elk from time to time. And so that kind of development is going in, and if we can hit it while the iron is hot, so to speak, hopefully we can come up with a unified vision of developing that South Beach area. And the signage is, I think, paramount. If you come into town, you have no idea where the Redwood National Park's even in this community. They have a Stout Grove sign that's about the size of a postage stamp, I think, that's brown in color that blends in with everything. And if you don't know what you're looking for, it's hard to get there. So, having that signage, we get a lot of criticism that government does not create jobs, and that is very true. However, government can create an atmosphere to encourage economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Turkey.
I love the projects that have been selected with an emphasis on our Veterans Memorial Hall. That's something that's extremely important for our community. Our signs are maybe postage stamp size, but say, Del Norte County, where we honor our veterans. And to see that building, sometimes you question it. So I would love for that to be more enhanced so that it's a meeting place for our veterans to gather and to support each other. So I love the project selected, but my emphasis would be on that one.
Supervisor Borges. Yeah, if I could just echo the Veterans Memorial Hall, upstairs could be a gem. So, yeah, fixing the elevator for the vets and letting them, allowing them all to go up there is a big deal for me as well. So, happy to see that. Let's see, I guess I need to open this up for any public comment, if there is, and I realize you're up for the next item as well, Randy. Is there any public comment on this item?
I don't know what's going on here, but all I heard was spend, 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 and don't you folks realize that the federal government is, $34 trillion in arrears, and that a lot of the inflation that we've suffered over the past 3 years are directly attached to that spend, spend, spend philosophy. And at some point, don't you suppose that that might not be something that's going to happen in the future, that all of this dependence on the government having an open wallet won't continue to exist, and all of these fantasies about spending, spending, spending may not occur? I mean, I don't understand what's going on here. The state, they just announced that they're going to have to trim $68 billion off of their budget, and that there's all likelihood that it'll be more trimming for 3 to 5 more years. What's going on here? I mean, I just flat don't understand why you don't trip to that fact.
Yeah, hello again. In regards to memorials and money and all that, we have a flag right now at Brother Jonathan's shredded, and there's a protocol for our flag. And this is embarrassing that we're talking about the big things and you can't even take care of the little things. It's a shame.
I'll put a call into the city on that. That's within the city limits.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say. Any other public comment? Okay, going to move on to item number 15, and that's receive a presentation on the development of a strategic plan and provide direction on the method for the development of a strategic plan after consideration of the options presented by our assistant CAO.
All right. So, strategic planning. So I think this is another item that the board has previously expressed a desire to see more of, and certainly an interest in. And I think that's for a good reason. So as I was putting together this presentation, a thought occurred to me, and I think part of it maybe has to do with the fact that I used to work at the airport. But it's, when a pilot takes off, they got a plane full of people. Captain gets in front of the plane, fires up the engine, does their little spiel on the radio. Do we all think that happens? Does she do that based on the mission, the values, and the goals of her responsibilities as the captain of that airplane? Of course, kind of a rhetorical question. local government, when the board makes decisions, appropriates public funds, does it happen with established mission, values, and goals and strategies? It should, certainly. I think, we can all look at high-performing organizations, and I think that's typically something you see is you have those things established. You base your decisions off of, in the case of local government, things that are weighed in on by the public. We all kind of want to be on the same page when it comes to the organizational mission and values of what it is we're doing up here and the decisions that you guys are making. I think the interest in strategic planning does kind of ebb and flow over time, but whenever there's a lack of those certain values, I think the interest should increase. So I think we're there now. I'm not saying that we don't have, mission or values or strategies, but I think the board certainly hasn't established those things in quite a long time, if ever. So maybe now's the time. And this presentation is really intended to be kind of more an introduction to strategic planning, also maybe some food for thought for the board. And I'll be happy to share the presentation with you guys later if you're interested. But really, this is kind of just, I think, the entry point into the conversation. And again, this item was added to this special session because this is something that needs action. We're at a point moving into the new year where, the time is right for us to go ahead and get in front of this conversation and ultimately it's going to be a board decision on where this conversation leads. But my hope, and I think the thought that Neil and I had in kind of putting all this together was, giving you guys food for thought. So a lot of this presentation is going to be questions. They don't need to be answered necessarily, but maybe they can be things to be thought about and considered. But what are the county's mission and values? What are the objective strategy and tactics for advancing the mission and values? Part of strategic planning is very big thinking, but also there has to be consideration for kind of that more narrow perspective too, which is what are the core services? Because we can't just be thinking big all the time. We also need to be providing resources and energy into providing the core services that in some cases the Constitution requires, and in many other cases the public just simply expects of local government. But as part of this process and looking at core services, what are essential or desirable services that are needed by the community that aren't being met? I would hope that if we do have a strategic planning conversation, we can consider where those gaps exist. Conversely, maybe there's things within our current structure that aren't as necessary as maybe they once were. And if that's truly the case, then maybe that can be considered as well, because if one's true, the other has to be true as well as part of that conversation. Is there organizational alignment from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top? Do adequate spans of control exist over and within the organization? Are sufficient resources available and being provided in order to deliver services? And again, a lot of these questions probably don't have answers right this moment, but I hope that it's food for consideration. Neil and I talk about this one all the time, but it's ongoing and upcoming initiatives of the organization. We heard the conversation briefly this morning, which was rightly pointed out by Supervisor Wilson and certainly highlighted by Supervisor Starkey, which is the minimum wage question and how do we do that? That's a big question. It really kind of ties into really a structural view of the organization, with vacancy rates being what they are and minimum wage increasing to what it will be. That's something that has to be reconciled. But in addition to that question that was already, or that initiative that was already pointed out this morning, there's a ton of other big things going on that if you don't have a clear plan for addressing, it's just going to get lost in the shuffle. And we can go through these things pretty quickly. And there's probably I'm sure there's things that are missing off of here. And Neil and I spent some time putting our heads together and trying to figure out what the big initiatives were going to be going into this new year. But minimum wage is certainly probably top of the list. Structural organization. We have a big, and this is something that the public hasn't really been, advised of probably fully to this point yet, but it's kind of been happening behind the scenes with auditor and with IT department, with the tax collector and all the department heads that are involved in kind of running this organization, which is our enterprise resource planning system, our ERP system. We have a budget software system now that's been put together over the decades by our IT department and our auditor and again, the different key stakeholders in the county budget process. But we're going to be transitioning to a new system, which is going to be an absolute game changer. It's going to be an extremely heavy lift. We've already received proposals and kind of demonstrations of what the options are going to be from a couple of the different vendors. And I believe The board has weighed in on this, but we're looking at a new system from Tyler Technologies, which is going to be a game changer in terms of how the budget's presented and kind of consumed on not just a daily basis, but a multi-year basis. There is the jail rehabilitation project, which I mentioned a minute ago, and has to do with the use of the federal appropriation and trying to secure additional funding to do all the work that we know needs to be done within that jail. There's the homeless ad hoc group. There's the sheriff's office ad hoc group. There's establishing a whole new county department, which is the public defender. There's the pension management policy. There's the personnel rules and policies manual update. There's the encampment resolution funding, which was discussed at the last meeting at length. There's the comprehensive economic development strategy, which is the SEDS, which is critical to the community for obtaining funding for community development within the community from all sorts of different funding sources. That expires this year. There's the hazard mitigation plan development. There's collective bargaining, which Ms. Williams noted earlier with respect to SEIU, but that's also happening right now with SEA, which is our Sheriff's Employees Association. It's going to be happening with the mid-management group, and of course it's going to have to happen with all the unrepresented groups. There is a general plan update, which is going to be enormous. The general plan was last updated in 2003. That's over 20 years ago. There's the Williams Drive Old Mental Health Building asbestos removal, demolition, and debris removal. There's the county fee study, update of county fees that needs to be conducted. There's the Florence Keller Capital Project, which is ongoing. There's Elk Valley tree removal. There's an 88 transition plan. And of course, there's the budget. So I suspect we're probably not hitting everything that is going to be coming up, but those are the ongoing initiatives. And so I think it's important for the board to recognize that as new initiatives are added, it just gets added to this list. And if we don't have a strategy for addressing those things, maybe nothing will ever be done, or it'll take longer than it should. So it is really important. There is crossover within the strategic plan to a number of other existing plans, documents. There's the budget, there's the legislative platform, which we've tried to be more strategic with. There's the capital improvement plan. There's various board adopted management plans, including the Point St. George management plan. There's the general plan, which I noted. There's the SEDS, which I noted. There's department specific goals and objectives that are established each and every year. So, does the board want to develop a plan for tackling these initiatives that includes board interaction and public participation? Does the board want to formally develop organizational mission and values to base decisions and budgetary investments in? If you do, this is a strategic plan. So then, as we've noted with all the questions that have already been kind of presented, how do we do this? How do we best implement the strategic plan? How will appropriations be made to ensure that resources are available to actually do the action items that are established as part of the strategic plan? How many initiatives should be included in your strategic plan? I think with the last slide, kind of going through all those different ongoing and upcoming initiatives, I wish we had a strategic plan already, because then we could at least develop a timeline, kind of goals, expectations for how we're going to be addressing each and every one of those different initiatives, whereas now they're all just expected to happen. So as far as the steps forward, I see basically two options. One would be the status quo, which is no direction. We don't do a strategic plan. And two would be we go ahead and develop it. And then if that's the direction the board wants to go, there's a couple different considerations there as well. One would be that we just go ahead and do it all in-house. Two would be that we do it in-house, maybe with the facilitator. And the third option would be that it be outsourced to somebody from the outside to come in and just take it on and do it for us, obviously with everybody's input and participation. So, my thought would be on the next question with respect to an annual plan or a multi-year plan is it probably, at least initially, should be both. You want to go ahead and establish kind of a long-range view with all of those fundamental values, mission that you're going to base all of your future actions off. But there needs to be kind of a realistic expectation for what can be done in any given year, given our capacity and our resources. So in talking to a number of other counties, and again, I think there's a lot of really high-performing organizations that we can look to for people that have done this before. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Thankfully, I've had through the connections of Supervisor Stark and Wilson, and I think Supervisor Short as well, in Oakland connected with Nevada County. And I would encourage you all to take a look at Nevada County's website and how they present their information. They've engaged pretty robustly, I would say, in strategic planning. And it isn't just a plan that sits on the shelf. It's a plan that's updated quarterly. It's reported on. Progress is tracked. There's accountability. So the timeline is going to be important, but again, I think initially it's going to have to maybe be a combination of things, kind of a long-term plan and the development of a plan for hopefully this upcoming year. And then lastly, there needs to be some responsibility for it, and typically this would be administration. So again, Neil and I have spent quite a bit of time talking together about this. We've had conversations, I think, with the majority of you guys on how this is all going to shape out. But ultimately, it is a board decision. So wanted to go ahead and make this presentation to the board today on why we think the time is right to do this, why we think it would be a good investment, and if not, respect that as well. I think there's two different options. We can just continue to do what we're doing, or we go ahead and try to take this initiative on. So that's all I had for you guys on this one. But again, I'm available for any questions and certainly would welcome any public comments as well.
Certainly. Why don't we go ahead and entertain public comments first, and then we'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Any public comment on this presentation?
Okay. So, what I seem to believe that is lacking in our county is vision. And what I mean by that is, first off, we need to clean up the county, of course. That's a no-brainer. We need to structurally fix those roads so that they're at least pleasant when you drive through our county. The city downtown is ridiculous. And I know you have no control over that, but it is in the county. We need to maybe talk about tax exemptions for new businesses coming in here for a short while, just to get them established and on their foot. We need to start having monthly parades that, like for instance, attract the Audubon Society. Parade of people dressed up like birds, whatever. Make something fun to occur every month in our county to make people want to come here and spend money. But before you can spend money, you've got to have stores downtown and coffee shops. You've got to, one of the things I noticed about Grants Pass, let me give you that, is every season you see their streets are lined with colorful trees, okay? There's no reason why we can't have that here. We have rhododendrons, they're indigenous here. Excuse me. There's people that literally come to our woods and take pictures of the rhododendrons when they're blooming in the spring. There's no reason why we shouldn't have something colorful and magnificent in our county to make people want to just stop and say, oh my God. Just use nature. Nature. We have hiking all over this county, but I don't ever see it advertised. I mean, you guys don't, it's like nobody has a vision and they don't have the energy to want to put in the work to bring the revenue here or to bring people here. And you bring people here and then we're going to have revenue. And we're not going to have to be worried about where's the money going to come from. With that said, that's all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Oh, him again. I mean, I just talked about the federal government and their problems. Don't you guys realize you have a budget of $208 million, which is 10% higher than it was last year? And the county's vision is to not benefit the county's residents, but to grow government, to make it bigger, to have more programs. I mean, this is beyond comprehension. How far do you think this train is going to go before it goes off the tracks? The state is broke. The state is going to have to cut back. Why aren't you thinking in those terms? Because this can't go on.
Hello again.
Good morning.
As a county employee, I know that employees have been asking for this for a long, long time, also as a county resident. It's rather strange and odd that Board of Supervisors in the past have totally been remiss in actually doing their jobs and developing a strategic plan to actually grow and develop this county. I think it's been rather negligent and shameful on past boards, so shame on them for not doing so. This is something that we should have been doing all along. Tourism is great. I understand it's something that we really do rely on. We are a coastal, actually rather interesting, we are coastal as well as we have the woods. We offer a lot to all kinds of people in terms of sports and recreation. However, we can also capitalize more on that if we're more strategic, well thought of, organized in how we're going to do that. Have a common theme. And I think this is something that I spoke about months ago when you had a consultant give you an idea of how to improve tourism here. I have yet to see anything on that. I don't know if that was a waste of money or not, but maybe you can incorporate that into your plan. Because you blow money, you spend money on all these consultants, but yet nothing happens, which I think, again, is a derelict of duty on the part of county supervisors. In terms of any strategic plan, yes, you definitely need to have a vision. It's something that county employees also, as residents of this community, also would love to see. And it needs to also be, besides tourism, a sustainable industry. You want to have people stay here. You want to have our youth stay here. And I've mentioned this to one supervisor who said no, but au contraire, I should know. You have youth who do leave and who don't really come back because they see the world out there, they see what's offered out there, and they're not going to come back here when there's nothing to offer them. So why not invest in some kind of industry besides tourism to keep our kids, to keep our people here? Any kind of strategic plan, though, that's going to look at the county structure is definitely going to have to involve all of the represented organizations, including this union. We are definitely open to engaging with you in that conversation, but keep in mind, we're going to do that in protecting our own. Because yes, we have mandated programs from the state and from the feds that are supposed to benefit the community at large. Some may disagree with that, but you know what? Those are the mandates. Some programs are actually written in the state code, like mine. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Anything you touch in that regards, you're going to have to take a look at the county structure. But if it's going to be reducing the staff that provides that, those programs necessary to this community, ooh, well, we're going to have a long conversation on that one, and it won't be pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Chair, I have a hand raised online.
Okay, let's go ahead with that one.
Robert, you are on.
Hi. I just want to say kudos for the presentation. I looked on the Nevada County website, and I've been trying to follow all the anything Brown Act regulated in our community, and couple of our boards didn't know they were Brown Acts in the community, and they're all different websites. And you look at the Nevada County website, and there's links to the school district meetings right on the Nevada County website. So, kudos for the plan, and especially I think it's important because we do have term limits now. So, we're always going to be, after we lose Supervisor Howard, we're always going to be rotating through supervisors. And so it'd be nice to just have, kind of a guiding course. Guiding courses can be changed and whatnot. For instance, I think like 18 years ago or so, we helped build where the Del Norte Community Open Door Clinic's at, and we have our healthcare district. We could be more involved with that because that was a project to attract and retain primary care providers to our community. And we haven't, it was kind of we kind of just leave a lot of things hanging, And I guess that's about it. But kudos on the plan. I think it looks exciting. I don't really see any spending so much as just, we see it all throughout the year where we have to do step increases and all because we didn't adjust our plan, for inflation or whatever. So every meeting almost we have to do a step increase that has to be approved by the board because of, we haven't caught up on resolutions and whatnot to allow for, appropriate functioning of some of our departments, maybe even. And so a good plan would be great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Carly, that was the only one? Okay. Going to close the public comment period and bring it back to the board for any discussion. Supervisor Wilson or Supervisor Starkey?
I appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much for putting it together. It was well done. Just for my personal opinion, I think the second option, which is that in-house with facilitator, is a easier bite. Plus, it allows organizational buy-in from the front end, which I think is paramount to any successful program being carried forward. That you have to have, it pushed forward by an organization as opposed to brought in by some outside source completely. Too many of those I've done, too many of those I've been participated in, and too many of them just sit on a shelf because they're not something that anybody picks up after the initial product is put out. And so the other thing is, and we've had this discussion with Nevada County, and what I like a lot about their system is it's ongoing, dynamic. That anybody within that process, whether it's the auditor's office, whether it's administration, whether it's the sheriff's office, if there's a project and it involves multiple agencies within the county or even outside the county, they're connected inside that strategy plan. It's clear who's responsible for what, and timelines are put in place so that they're expected to hit their goals and objectives within a certain framework of time. And so it keeps everything on track, especially when you're dealing with multiple agents, different departments within a specific project. So I like that fact. I like the fact that it's clear. Public can go on. They can see where these programs are, what they are, and where we are as far as completion and action being taken. I agree that January, February needs to be the front end of this kind of a plan, strategic plan, that it has to be in place so that the budget going forward has clear direction, understanding, and goals and objectives to be met during negotiations and understanding that, and it's out front. So there's nothing that's going to be and again, participation not only by the agencies but also by the public is important in a lot of this going forward, so that everybody has a clear understanding of where we're going. This was one of my primary goals when I ran, because I see things that are coming up, and economically I see devastation within the state. I see federal dollars. Those things are going to start having to be affected and dry up. As that goes, more and more pressure gets put on local governments, city and counties. Our costs escalate because the states aren't going to meet and fulfill those goals. We have legislation, we have actions being taken to up the minimum wage, not only the beginning of the year, but I'm sure the initiative will pass. Then you've got $17 and $18 coming shortly behind it. All these pressures that we're facing, how do we deal with these? And for us to be successful, we have to put plans in place. And that's where the strategic planning comes in ahead of. If this happens, we will do X, Y, and Z. And that we have something, and we're not reactive, but proactive in where the county is going to go. And making sure that we strategically determine what are our priorities. If X, Y, or Z happen, we have it already pre-planned on what our actions and activities are going to be to do to provide the necessary services. Where do we cut? Where do we advance ourselves? And that's where the strategic planning comes in place. I'm thankful that we've had reach outs to Nevada County and have looked, when I was at meetings, that was the recommendation by professionals that do strategic planning, that they felt that among several other counties were some of the best in the state. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. But what we do have to do is put the hours and the effort and the time on putting together a strategic plan, because I think it's paramount, especially as we go forward, that really gets done. And I'm thankful to staff and to fellow board members who have expressed the need for this. Now we get to define how it's going to go forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Supervisor Starkey.
Thank you so much, Randy, for this. This is exactly what I've been wanting for the last 3 years. One thing about Nevada County that is very interesting is every January they have a workshop, right? And so their board in January decides the projects that they want to accomplish that year. And then throughout the year, they're bringing that information forward to the public, and the public gets a chance to be engaged in it as well. This is a blueprint for us to be able to actually see the accomplishments. This is going to be the report card on what projects we propose with the input of the public and how we are able to accomplish them. I think statistics really need to be looked at for every department as well, and this is a side note. I think we need to really analyze. We have, 2 planners right now. How many permits are being approved every single year? Let's really look at those numbers. Let's analyze our budget and decide, are we spending our money where we need to, or do we need to adjust? We should constantly be analyzing this. Nevada County provides that report card. Another one that I would advise people to look into is Marin County has, and will never be as rich as Marin County. However, I love Marin County, but as it's just a really good format. It explains the statistics related to how the county is spending their money, and it's showing it's all laid out there. And I think it's extremely important for us to develop something on a much smaller scale, but something to where we have a report card. The public can look at us and say, all right, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. There's going to be reasons why we can't get to Y and Z, but we'll be able to explain that to the public. So I love this idea. I'm all for how we need to get it going. I agree with Supervisor Wilson that an in-house with a facilitator might be the best. To kind of give us a little bit of best of both worlds. However, I don't know the workload that's going to impose upon staff for that, but I think we're going to be working so much smarter by doing this.
Thank you. Supervisor Borges.
Yeah, I'll just echo everything everybody else has said. Great presentation, Randy. I think going no direction status quo is not an option. Moving forward with the strategic plan is great. I think outsourcing to professionals is a waste of money. Nobody really knows what we need except for us around here. I would like to see, with you as a leader, you do an amazing job at this stuff, taking the lead on this, but I also understand you have a pile of things to do, so I'd be open to discuss further what you would think is the best direction, whether it's with a facilitator or not. But I just think it's a great start, and I look forward to moving forward with it.
Thank you, Supervisor Borges. Yeah, this is a long time coming, in my opinion. And as for which direction to go, I agree with you, Supervisor Borges. I think Randy would be an outstanding point man. Not sure about his workload. The in-house facilitator sounds like the best way to go, but with the caveat in my mind is that it not just be a person that is just a professional facilitator. If we're going to have somebody here facilitating this, it would be somebody that would have experience facilitating strategic plans for counties, that would have, I don't appreciate operating in a bubble. We have very smart, educated, great people working at the county at our leadership levels, but I'm sure every one of them would recognize getting out of your bubble and seeing what other places and people are doing is valuable. So
having that facilitator come in, if they have that experience with other counties, facilitating those things, having different ideas, different ways that counties are doing things, so they could have that kind of wisdom and input for us, would be great. If that facilitator was just a middleman that didn't have that experience, I may not be that in favor, and would think that that Randy would be our go-to guy for that, even though he may not have the time. But yes, I appreciate this, Randy bringing it forward, and Supervisor Wilson standing on your soapbox and making this your direction that we want to go in. Appreciate that. So with that being said,
Chair?
yes.
You're gonna get board direction, right, as a whole for this, for option, correct? Randy, you need board
That's
direction?
where I was going.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. Yep.
Sorry for interrupting then, my bad.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I was just going to say, with that being said, we need to consider the options presented and have direction from the board. I don't know if you need an official motion, Jackie. I don't know if that's really necessary, but maybe a consensus would be good enough. What are your thoughts?
I think you should make a motion.
Okay.
I will motion for staff to determine a method of the development of a strategic plan. I don't want to narrow it down. So this is where my thing is I think we need it with a facilitator, but it sounds like Supervisor Borges is kind of like, if we can do it with just Randy, that'd be great. So okay, so either option 1 or 2. Depending on staff availability and staff direction back to the board, I would make the motion that we approve the direction to develop a strategic plan. Is that clear as mud? Okay.
So we have a motion to develop a strategic plan and having staff evaluate option 1 and 2. Correct? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Kylie, will you poll that vote, please?
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. And I believe we've hit all the items. Kylie, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, well, happy 5th day of Christmas, and we will see you again at our first regular meeting in January. Have a great day.